Hello everyone and welcome back to Affinity for Commander. My name is Alex, and today we're going to be taking a look at how to upgrade the Fae Domain deck from the wilds of Eldraine. Just a quick reminder, if you wish to purchase any of the cards I'm going to be talking about here, then you know you've got to go over to cardmarket.com. It's also where I'm going to be getting all the prices that you're going to see on screen today. Or if you're from the land of liberty and eagles with receding hairlines, then be sure to check out our link for TCG Player or use our discount code over at Flipside Gaming. Using these links or codes does not cost you anything extra, but really helps the channel out quite a lot. Now, on to our fairy friends. The deck itself comes with two commanders, which for this deck I'm going to be focusing on Tegwyl. He's a 2/3 flying Death Toucher who reads other fairies you control get +1/+1, and whenever another fairy you control dies, you draw a card and lose a life. Now the other potential commander is Alayla, Cunning Conqueror, who I'm just not really feeling. She's one more in terms of cost, is a lot more dependent on you usually just, cantripping in your opponent's turn to get more fairies out, and then goading other creatures. If she were the commander, I'd be a lot more tempted by just a straight control Dimir deck rather than a Faerie Typal deck, which is what the deck is going to be here. So with that out of the way, let's take a look at the actual Faerie Domain deck as it comes in the box, which, thanks to Wizards, we actually have the entire deck list located here. Which, overall, it's a pretty solid deck. It's got strong themes, some rather decent reprints as well. Galendra, for example, was 677 before this reprint, and the Brazen Borrowers was even worse at being 1226. So they've got a good tribe, strong reprints, but it definitely could be better. I mean, wow, 39 land, yes, some of those are getting cut. So we're firstly going to take a look at the cards to take out, and then look at what cards to put back in to make it up to the 99. Faerie Seer is just kind of a plain old flyer, which yes, it outdoes Stormcrow with that spicy scry trigger, but overall it's either great turn 1 or just a dead creature from turn 4 or 5 onwards. Nightveil Sprite for the same reason, great turn 2 or 3, beyond that not really a great creature when we've got better stuff to be casting. Dig Through Time, a fantastically good draw spell, which essentially for 2 blue mana you get to go 7 deep and put 2 cards into your hand. But I'm still going to take it out, considering that there are cards I want to be putting in that really like our fairies being in the graveyard, and delving them away is not part of the plan here. Illusionist Gambit is just... why? I'd rather run Aetherize, and we're going to run Aetherize. Perplexing Test is out simply because we're not going to be making that many tokens. If this was an Una deck, then yeah, by all means keep this test in. But realistically, this card belongs in more of a Manius Calgar, Adrix and Nev deck rather than a Faerie Typal one. Repulse, Runaway and Snap I'm all taking out for the exact same reason, and that is we have removal at home. And the removal at home is better. I mean seriously, we're in Dimir here. We have better ways of getting rid of a problem than repeatedly putting it back to someone's hand so they can recast it next turn. How about we just kill the problem and then we can move on with our lives? Faerie Bladecraft is one of the new cards that I'm just not really feeling. I mean, you want it to be bigger, but then you also want it to die for its trigger to deal damage, but you can only really put a counter on it a turn, really. Yeah, not feeling it. Nettling Nuisance gives your opponents a 4/2. That's kind of it, I don't really need to say more, do I? It gives your opponents a free guy. Yes, it can't attack you as it's goaded. That can still be attack triggers sack, fodder triggers ferocious. It might be a token deck that they get to copy over and over again. Yeah, giving my opponents free things is never a good idea, and I'm not going to start in Dimir. Mocking Sprite is a good interpretation of Goblin Electromancer, which is also a nice card, but we're not really an instant or sorcery spell heavy deck, so whilst this card will be going to my Mizzix deck, it's not really the card I want in here. And finally, Spell Scorn Coven, a card that again bounces something when we can just kill it. And whilst the ETB of getting rid of 3 cards from on the table is good, it's 4 mana for then a card that doesn't really do a lot, so again, doesn't make the cut. We're also going to be replacing a few of the lands in the deck, so for example Choked Estuary, because when you are really needing to draw a land card, drawing one that will come into play tapped, because you don't have a basic to show, is not great. Same for Temple of Deceit. Again, it's going to come in tapped, and even with that scry trigger, not really worth it. In addition to this, we're going to be taking out 5 basics to drop the land count down from 39 to a much more reasonable 34 for a Faerie Tempo deck. With that in mind, we're going to be swapping out land for land, so Temple of Deceit, the Choked Estuary, and 3 of the remaining basics are all going to be swapped out for new land cards. So, just in case you weren't keeping track, we're going to be swapping out 17 non-land cards and 5 land cards to just increase the deck's power level a little bit and make it a bit more consistent, I think. So, let's get to it. So firstly, we're going to start with the non-land cards. First thing to put in, Filter Out, a card I absolutely love, and I know I just chastised bouncing things, but this is how you do it. 3 mana, instant speed, bounce all artifacts, enchantments, planeswalkers, battles, I guess. And that's just for 3 mana. That is how you do a bounce spell. Next is fairly obvious card to put in, Faerie Harbinger, a flashing flying fairy that chooses up any card we particularly want to buff our board or give everything Shroud, for example. And considering we can flash this in our opponent's end step so we can draw it on our turn, definitely sets this Harbinger above the rest of that particular cycle. Spell Stutter Sprite is the actual inspiration for the Spell Stutter that's actually in the deck that we're keeping in, because it is a very unique counterspell that is awesome and the creature is no different. A 2 mana 1/1 with a relevant creature type that comes in and counters a spell? Yeah, I'll take that. Fairy Mastermind to keep up with that person who played Rhystic Study and absolutely no one is paying for it. Fairy Artisans gets a copy of whatever was last played, whether that's a cheap mana dork or someone's commander. Either way, we're going to get value from a simple 4 mana flyer. Metallic Mimic is technically not a fairy, but considering the +1/+1 counters you can put on all your fairies that enter the battlefield, the amount of power it generates is insane. In fact, if you'd like to go and check out how insane this card is in any Typal deck, specifically my Spirits deck, then go over to Chad Magic and check out their gameplay where I play this card in my Spirit Typal deck. It was awesome, and the card is actually super powerful. Drown in the Loch is a solid kill spell or counter spell, because again, we're in Dimir, we have kill spells at home. Speaking of kill spells, Infernal Grasp is a great way to get rid of 2 creatures that we don't like, and yeah, losing 5 life, we're in Commander, we've got 40 of it. Sure, it's fine. As mentioned, Aetherize is a great way to bounce all attacking creatures, because again, that saves you, is technically a fog, and also is massively annoying to any token player. And similar to Aetherize, Raise the Palisade is a fantastic one-sided board wipe that leaves our fairies completely untouched, so we can get in for a good amount of damage with absolutely no ramifications on the crackback. Unwind is just a strictly better negate in this deck, considering a lot of our creatures have flash. So being able to counter something we don't like and then keep that mana up to be able to flash in something like the Harbinger, for example, in our end step is just fantastically good for this deck. Skull Clamp for the obvious reason that with Tigreal we want our fairies dying to get the card advantage. Skull Clamp accomplishes this and also draws us some additional cards. Speaking of dying, Ashnod's Altar is a great way to get rid of any of our fairies that have already been targeted or, turned into trees or whatever, so that we can get more mana from them, and also trigger Tigreal's ability to draw a card for their noble sacrifice. Notorious Throng is a great way to take advantage of all our flies hitting all 3 of our opponents to generate us some blockers. And if that prowl cost is paid, maybe even just knocking a player out the game by having an extra turn with those additional fairies as well. Fairy Fencing is a new card from the Wilds of Eldraine that is just a fantastic kill spell, as with a fairy out. This essentially reads to me as 1 black, 1 generic, and you get to give something -5/-5, which, yeah, that seems balanced. And finally, for the non-land cards, and the reason I took Dig Through timeout, is Haunting Voyage and Patriarch's Bidding. Now, the bidding does allow your opponents to also get back creatures from their graveyard, so maybe if your LGS has a lot of Typal decks running around, maybe don't play this particular card, but ours doesn't, so I'm going to be playing this all the time, just to grab back every single fairy from the grave right into play. For the Voyage, we ideally want to be foretelling it earlier in the game, so everyone forgets about it, and then playing it later on, where we can just take our graveyard, put it back on the table, and then hopefully no one has an answer to our giant fairy army. Now onto the lands. We took out 5 with 2 non-basics and 3 basics. We need to be putting in some more for either additional advantage and just some better fixing, really. For the fixing side of things, we have Shipwrecked Marsh, Drowned Catacombs, and Fetid Pools. And personally, I really like the bicycling lands. You can fetch them up with any particular card that cares about swamps and islands, and also they have cycling, so if you're flooding out, you can just use them to draw a card later on. And the last 2 lands to put in are Rivendell, because we are a tempo deck and have a lot of legendary creatures, so being able to play this untapped, hold up counter, interaction, or flashing fairies, then decide not to, so we get to scry and top cards of our library to shore up our next draws is always good. And finally, Takenuma Abandoned Maya, a great way to recur any of our value pieces or even win conditions like Shadow Puppeteers. That way we can actually increase the power of our boards and swing to win the game. So with that all out of the way, we're now back up to 100 cards and the deck looks like this. And the curve like this. I think you'll agree, a much better fit for a Fairies Tempo deck. Overall, the Fairies deck is excellent value by itself, but these have just some minor changes to make that deck a little more powerful to compete at the LGS, which I'll be more than happy to take down and start dominating the table with these flying pranksters. Even if they are a little bit terrifying at times. Just a little bit terrifying. And that's it for the video, guys. Thank you so much for watching. What are you going to include in the Fairies deck? If I've missed something extra spicy, let me know in the comments below. As always, this video and all Affinity for Commander content is made possible thanks to support of our amazing patrons. You guys are truly awesome. If you too like to become a patron of the channel and get access to exclusive EDH related rewards, including games with Martin and I, then be sure to check out our link in the description box. You can also support the channel through the quick and easy ways liking, subscribing, and hitting that bell icon to make sure you never miss a video. But that'll be it from me for now. As always, I've been Alex, and I'll see you next time.